Michael Carter stood outside the bar that night. Not because he belonged there, but because he had been stopped, his hands still tingling from the bouncer's grip, the cold refusal echoing in his chest like an old bruise. You can picture it, can't you? The look of dismissal on the doorman's face. The way his eyes never once lifted to truly see the person standing in front of him. It was the kind of rejection that feels less like denial and more like erasure. A quiet declaration that you do not exist. Not here, not tonight, maybe not anywhere. And you're probably asking yourself why that matters. Why something so ordinary should weigh so heavy, but you've never been in that exact silence. The one that falls just before something shifts. The one that feels like the whole world holding its breath, because it knows what you done. I want you to understand this isn't just about a bar, or about a woman being turned away. This is about the moment reality twisted underfoot. When the night that should have disappeared into memory became the night everyone wished they could forget. Because after she was denied entry, she didn't argue. She didn't shout, she didn't even look back. She simply leaned close enough that only Michael heard it, a whisper that did not belong in that air. Did not belong in this time, maybe did not belong in this world at all. No one else noticed, not the bartenders polishing glasses, not the couples laughing inside, not the man at the door, who still wore his scorn like a badge. But Michael froze, his pulse stuttering, because what she whispered was a name. Not her name, not his. A name he had not spoken in 23 years, a name no one alive should know. And maybe you're thinking, fine coincidence. Maybe she guessed. But ask yourself this. How does a stranger whisper the exact name of your brother who vanished without explanation when you were a boy? How does she deliver it like a funeral toll, like a door opening in a house you swore you'd locked forever? You weren't in Michael's chest, feeling the air thin, watching the world dim, as if the bar's neon lights had been swallowed whole. You were in his head when every memory he deburied clawed its way to the surface, demanding he see it, demanding he admit it had never gone away. What followed was simple. She walked off into the dark street, not hurried, not afraid, as if she had completed what she came for. Michael tried to move, tried to follow, but the doorman blocked him again, shaking his head with that same detached certainty as if he didn't even see the woman who'd just left, as if she hadn't existed at all. And when Michael turned to point, to insist, the sidewalk was empty, the street silent, her shadow nowhere to be found. The next morning, when word spread that the bar had a new owner, no one believed it, until the papers confirmed it, until the deed was signed, until her name appeared where no one had seen it before. She hadn't been allowed inside, but now she owned the entire building. And here's the question you're not supposed to ask, the one Michael could never answer. When the woman whispered his dead brother's name, was it meant for him, or was it a reminder that the bar had always belonged to her and we'd just been living inside her silence? Because if that's true, then maybe what vanished that night was a person. It was the thin line between our lives and hers. And Michael knows one more thing he'll never confess. The name she spoke was only his brother S. It was his. Would you like me to continue this opening into the next sequence, where the mystery around the building and her ownership deepens, or keep the tension suspended here? As if the audience is left staring at a file they were never meant to open. Michael told himself he wouldn't think about it again, that it was just a coincidence, a cruel trick of memory that made a stranger's whisper sound like the name he'd buried in the dirt years ago. But the more he tried to silence it, the louder it echoed every time he blinked, every time his heart stumbled in his chest, every time he replayed that single instant outside the bar. You know how memory works, don't you? It isn't a clean replay, not a camera reel. It corrodes, it bends, it rearranges itself until you're no longer certain whether you're remembering the truth or simply the way you wish it had been. That's the part that scared him the most. Not the whisper, not the building changing hands overnight, but the sickening possibility that he'd invented the whole thing, that maybe no woman had stood there at all. The doubts crept in through the seams of his life. The next morning, when Michael reached for his phone, the lock screen showed a photograph he swore he had never taken. The bar's neon sign flickering in the dark, captured at the exact angle he remembered standing in, though he hadn't lifted his phone once that night. He tried to tell himself it was an old picture, a glitch, a leftover image from months ago. But then he saw the time stop 11:47 p.m., the precise minute the whisper had curled into his ear. And underneath the image, in the corner of the screen where no text should have been, was a single word. Remember. You'd think he'd save the photo, send it to someone, get proof. But when he opened his gallery, it was gone. Just black squares where it should have been. That's how paranoia starts. Not with shadows in the corner, not with ghostly footsteps. Paranoia begins when the evidence starts erasing itself. When you have to keep repeating to yourself, no, I saw it, I know I did. That's when the real fear sets in, not fear of ghosts, fear of your own mind. It would have been easier if he could have dismissed it as madness, locked it away as grief leaking through the cracks. But the world wouldn't let him. On his way to work, his car radio cut out, mid-commercial, and what replaced it was not static, not music. It was a voice, thin, hollow, recorded decades ago. His brother's voice, saying his name over and over, like a child calling from the bottom of a well. He pulled to the side of the road, shaking, fumbling with the dial. But the second he hit record on his phone, the sound snapped back to a weather forecast, cheerful and bland, like nothing had ever happened. That was the first time he saw Daniel. At least, he thought his name was Daniel, though he never introduced himself properly, never explained how he always seemed to appear at the edges of Michael's panic. He was standing across the street, leaning against a lamppost, staring at him with that calm, unreadable expression people wear when they know something you don't. He didn't wave, didn't move, just waited until Michael noticed him. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, slipping into the crowd as if he'd never been there at all. Maybe Daniel was real, maybe he wasn't. The thing with unreliable people, they don't enter your life the way normal ones do. They don't introduce themselves, they don't ask for permission, they just arrive, and from that moment on, you can't tell if they're saving you or dismantling you piece by piece. The second time Michael saw him was at the bar. He hadn't planned to go back, not after what happened. But you know how curiosity eats at the edges of a wound, it doesn't let it heal. It pulls you toward the infection until you can't ignore it. The neon sign was still there, but the name above the door had changed. Letters rearranged into something unfamiliar. And standing by the entrance, just where the bouncer had stood days ago, was Daniel. Except this time, he smiled. "You don't belong here," he said softly, and then, as if to twist the knife, "But she does." Michael's breath caught. He wanted to ask who she was, whether Daniel meant the woman from that night, or someone else entirely. But before he could speak, a door slammed somewhere down the street, and the sound hit his ears wrong, like a recording played backwards, sharp and disorienting, as though time itself had stuttered. When he turned back, Daniel was gone. The doorway was empty. The building looked abandoned. That's when the missing memories began. At first, just fragments, blank spots where he should have remembered conversations. Entire commutes he couldn't recall driving. Coworkers insisting he'd been at meetings he had no memory of attending. One of them even mentioned he'd brought up his brother's name in passing, as if it were nothing unusual, as if they'd all known. But he hadn't spoken that name in decades. Not once. It got worse when he checked his voicemail. There were recordings, 3, maybe 4 of his own voice, distorted and echoing, whispering things he didn't understand. Some words blurred, others sharp. Asterisk, don't trust him. Asterisk, she already knows. Asterisk, you were never supposed to come back. He listened to them again and again, trying to convince himself it was a prank, some sick joke, but the timestamp on the calls didn't lie. Each one had been recorded while he was asleep, and through it all, Daniel kept reappearing. In reflections, in the background of photographs, sitting at the far end of diners Michael swore he hadn't walked into, always, watching, never explaining. Sometimes he'd speak a single sentence cryptic, misplaced. Asterisk, you're asking the wrong question. Or, asterisk, it's not about what happened, it's about what they let you remember. Then he'd vanish before Michael could demand more. By now, you're probably wondering what's real, what's madness, what's supernatural. But the part no one wants to admit is that it doesn't matter. Once the cracks begin, once your life starts filling with skipped time, missing evidence, and voices that bleed through the walls, reality itself becomes negotiable. And that's the part they don't want you to remember, that the human mind is the most fragile lock ever built. And once it's pried open, nothing inside it can be trusted again. The final time Daniel appeared, he wasn't standing at a distance. He was in Michael's apartment, sitting on the couch like he belonged there, a half-drunk glass of water in his hand. And what he said next ruined any illusion Michael had left of control. "She didn't whisper your brother's name," Daniel said slowly, with that same calm, steady gaze. "She whispered mine." And then Michael blinked. The couch was empty. The water glass was gone. And in his phone gallery, where there should have been nothing, there was a new photograph. A man sitting on his couch, head tilted in the shadows. But it wasn't Daniel. It was Michael. Would you like me to push this deeper into a paranoid breakdown, where Michael begins to question whether Daniel is an external figure at all, or would you rather I spiral it toward a supernatural reveal, where Daniel proves to be tied to the woman and the building itself? Michael thought the sickness in his life had finally begun to take shape, that the scattered voices and missing hours had a name, a source, a thread he could follow back to reason. It started with a folder old court records, newspaper clippings, the kind of yellowed paper you can smell before you touch. He didn't remember requesting them, didn't remember ordering anything from the archives, but there they were on his kitchen table one morning, bound together with a fraying rubber band, as if someone or something had been waiting for him to notice. Inside was the hidden truth he had been clawing at in the dark. A police report from 23 years ago, the day his brother disappeared. Only this time, the language was different from what he remembered. Words he could have sworn were never there before. The description of the last sighting, for instance, it wasn't just last seen outside the family home. It was specific. It mentioned a bar, the exact bar where Michael had been denied entry weeks ago. the same bar the woman now owned. For the first time, Michael felt the rush of clarity, like standing up to fast after hours in the dark, dizzy but certain he could finally see. He convinced himself that everything strange had been nothing more than grief spilling out in disguised forms, hallucinations stitched together by a memory glitch, a subconscious attempt to bring closure to the wound of losing his brother. It made sense, didn't it? The building wasn't cursed, the whispers weren't supernatural. They were echoes of a trauma he had tried too hard to bury. The truth behind what no one tells you. The mind bends reality to protect itself, even if it destroys you in the process. He almost smiled, almost believed the storm had passed. But false resolutions are the most dangerous kind. They feed you comfort just long enough for you to let go of the railing, because the deeper he read through the folder, the more one detail refused to fit. The witness statement, an elderly woman who claimed she'd seen a boy pulled toward the alley near the bar contained handwriting that felt familiar. Not just familiar, identical. Michael held the page under the kitchen light and felt his skin crawl. He knew this handwriting because it was his own. The loops of the letters, the hesitation on certain strokes, it was his. Yet the file was dated years before he was even old enough to write. The illusion of understanding collapsed in an instant. The false clarity that had carried him dissolved into dread. If the evidence could rewrite itself, if even the past was being redacted and rearranged, then there was no anchor left. And then, as he traced the letters again with his fingertip, a memory clawed its way back, jagged and incomplete, as if it had been waiting beneath the surface. A summer evening, the smell of gasoline, his brother running ahead of him down a narrow alley, a door painted red, half hidden between brick walls, and a voice not his brother's calling from inside. That was the last thing he remembered before everything fractured. Before he woke in his bed the next morning with his mother's screams downstairs and the news that his brother was gone. It should have been enough to dismiss as trauma. A child's blurred memory, but the detail he'd never told anyone, the thing that locked his chest tight as he sat in his kitchen holding the file, was that he remembered opening that red door. He remembered stepping inside, and though every sound and image from that instant had been erased from his mind, he knew without doubt he hadn't walked out alone. The present began to fold into the past in cruel ways. That night, the apartment building groaned with sounds that weren't mechanical, weren't explainable, like laughter playing under static, like someone dragging furniture across a floor above him when he lived on the top floor. His phone buzzed with voicemails again, but this time they weren't just whispers. They were recordings of arguments he half remembered having as a teenager, except in each one there was a third voice, calm, steady, patient, not his mother, not his father, a voice threading itself through his childhood like it had always been there, coaching, guiding, correcting. It was then he realized this force, whatever it was, hadn't arrived now. It had been there from the beginning. Watch it. The paranoia thickened until it wasn't paranoia anymore. He noticed gaps in the photographs his mother had given him years back. Family pictures where faces blurred at the edges, as if someone had been erased. In one, at his brother's 10th birthday, a glass was held aloft in the corner of the frame, but the hand was missing, the arm cropped out by nothing. His mother always told him it was just poor photography. But now, he wasn't so sure, and when he pressed the photograph against the kitchen light, faint letters bled through the paper, written in the same looping script he recognized as his own. "You were never supposed to look." Daniel appeared again. Or maybe he didn't. Michael woke in the middle of the night to find the man standing at the foot of his bed. Eyes black with shadow, lips moving silently. When he snapped the light on, the room was empty. But the air was warm, like someone had just exhaled against his cheek. And worse, when he checked his phone the next morning, there was a new video saved to his files. Shaky, distorted, like footage caught from a camera he didn't own. It showed him sleeping, and in the corner of the room, blurred but unmistakable, was Daniel. This should have been the unraveling point, the moment Michael broke entirely. But instead, something inside him twisted the fear into resolve. He convinced himself he'd uncovered the mystery at last. Daniel wasn't real. He was a manifestation of guilt, a hallucination born from suppressed trauma, a symbol. He almost believed it, almost, until he paused the video at the very last frame, because there, carved faintly into the wall behind his sleeping body, was the same word that had haunted his lock screen weeks ago, remember, and suddenly, the entire story, up until now, cracked apart. Because if Daniel was nothing but his mind, then who had carved the word into the paint behind his head? If the whisper was only grief, then how had the police file been rewritten in his own hand? If the bar was only coincidence, then why had the memory of the red door returned, exactly now? Michael stared at the screen, his pulse hammering, and knew the hidden truth, the one no one tells you, the one they lie about to keep you calm. That the danger wasn't in losing his mind. The danger was in recovering it, because buried beneath every missing hour, every vanished photograph, every corrupted recording, was something that had been guiding him all along. Not Daniel, not the woman, not even his brother's absence. Something else, something older, something that never needed to be named to be obeyed. And as he closed his eyes, ready to throw the phone across the room, another memory bled through, sharp and undeniable. The night his brother disappeared, the red door hadn't been closed behind him. It had been left wide open. And he was the one who walked back out. Would you like me to take the next chapter deeper into the red door itself, turning it into the core symbol that connects past and present, or spiral further into the psychological collapse, where Michael begins to question whether he himself has been the unreliable witness all along? Michael had convinced himself, briefly, that his story was his alone, that the red door, the whispers, the missing photographs belonged solely to the fracture in his own life. But it never works that way, does it? Trauma feels personal until you realize it's been manufactured, distributed, replicated. That's when the weight sets in, the awareness that you are not the only one carrying the silence. The first proof came in the form of an envelope slipped under his apartment door. No return address, no handwriting, just a symbol, drawn in black ink, a circle with a single slash through the center. It wasn't threatening, not exactly, but something about it burned into him like recognition. He knew that shape, though he couldn't place where. Inside the envelope was a stack of Polaroids, their colors faded, but their images sharp. Faces of strangers asleep in their beds, unaware. Each photograph bore the same faint word scratched into the bottom margin: remember. The strangest part wasn't the photographs. It was the last one in the stack. A picture of Michael himself, asleep in his own room, taken from the exact angle of the video he'd found on his phone. Except in this version, he wasn't alone in the bed. A second figure lay beside him, hair tangled across the pillow, face turned just out of frame. He didn't dare show it to anyone. He barely dared look at it himself. It might have been easy to dismiss as an elaborate hoax if not for the dreams that followed. They weren't his alone. He began waking at 3:17 every morning, slick with sweat, heart pounding, with the clear sensation that he had just been elsewhere, among others, faces he didn't recognize, yet knew intimately. Streets he had never walked, but could map with precision. He started writing them down, sketching them out in notebooks he hid under his mattress. Days later, when he passed an alley near the waterfront, he froze. It was one of the alleys from his dreams. Down to the broken lamppost and the spray-painted word along the brick wall. Asterisk, you were right all along. He had never told anyone those words. He had never written them, and yet there they were, waiting for him. That was the night he realized the others had been watching, not in the sense of casual witnesses, but in the way you monitor an experiment, track a subject, document an unfolding pattern. The confirmation came not from the city around him, but from the screen in his pocket. A text appeared from an unknown number. No greeting, no explanation, just a line of text. Asterisk, we've seen what you've seen. A moment later, another. Asterisk, it's not just you. The words cut through him with equal parts terror and relief, because they proved two things at once: that he wasn't losing his mind, and that the sickness was bigger than him. The communication never came in full sentences, always fragments, riddles, cryptic signals that could be read as either warnings or commands. They told him to look closer at old footage, to check libraries of found recordings, to search for what the government never released. And when he did, he found it. A local news broadcast from 20 years ago, archived in poor resolution. A reporter standing outside the same bar, her microphone trembling slightly in the wind. The story was about a building permit dispute, mundane enough. But behind her shoulder, frozen in the grain of the footage, was a boy staring at the camera. His brother, who had disappeared months before that broadcast. Michael paused and replayed, searching the boy's face. And every time he hit pause, something shifted. Sometimes the boy's expression changed. Sometimes the background blurred into a different street. And once, just once, it wasn't his brother at all. It was Michael himself, a child staring out from decades past with the same hollow look he wore now. The messages escalated after that. Not texts anymore, but emails from blank senders, voices caught in voicemail static, words scratched into bathroom mirrors after hot showers. Asterisk, we were there too. Asterisk, they never stopped. Asterisk, what you lost was taken, not forgotten. And always, that single recurring symbol, the circle with the slash turning up in chalk on sidewalks, etched into bus seats, burned into the wood of a park bench he swore hadn't been marked the day before. It was through these fragments that he began to sense a larger architecture. That he wasn't a man unraveling, but a piece in a structure designed to collapse slowly. He started to notice patterns in the timing. Messages arriving only after his dreams. Photographs appearing only after his doubts. The others weren't just watching, they were responding. Testing how far he could be pushed before the fracture widened enough for something else to slip through. And then the observer appeared. Not Daniel, not the woman, not even the ghost of his brother. This one was different. He called himself Samuel, though Michael doubted that was his real name. He was older, his presence calm in a way that unsettled more than comforted. Samuel claimed he had been tracking these events for decades, that he had files of his own, recordings and transcripts Michael had never seen. He spoke in a quiet tone, to steady, to rehearsed, like someone who had repeated the same speech to countless others before him. "You're not crazy," Samuel said, placing a hand over Michael's notebooks. "They lied to you. They lied to all of us. What you remember is only what you were allowed to remember. What you lost was not an accident, it was a design." Michael wanted to believe him. For the first time, someone else was articulating what had churned in his chest for weeks. But there was something off about Samuel's eyes, the way they seemed to flicker when he spoke certain words, the way his reflection in the window behind him didn't match the tilt of his head. It was then Michael realized the danger of a third perspective, because if Samuel was the only one telling the truth, then there was no way to prove whether that truth belonged to Michael or to the force that had been shaping him all along. As the nights grew heavier, the conspiracy widened. Michael began to hear stories of others waking at 3:17 a.m., others receiving photographs of themselves sleeping, others haunted by the same symbols scratched into the margins of their lives. He wasn't special, he was one of many. And that was worse than being alone, because it meant whatever had taken his brother wasn't done. It was still collecting, it was still watching, and maybe it was still deciding who would walk back out through the red door and who would not. The last message came in a form he could not ignore. A video file, emailed from his own address. He opened it, breath caught in his throat. The footage was old, weathered, with the quality of found footage from 20 years ago. But it was unmistakable. It showed a group of children standing in front of the red door, their faces obscured by shadow. One of them was his brother. One of them was Michael. And one of them, this was the detail that broke him, was staring directly at the lens with a smile he recognized from Samuel. The screen went black. And then a single phrase appeared in plain white text. "You were right all along. But here's what you need to understand." That phrase wasn't meant for Michael. It was meant for you. And the question is whether you'll admit you've seen the symbol before, whether somewhere in the recesses of your own memory, etched into a bathroom mirror, or scrawled on a school desk. The circle with the slash has already been waiting for you. Do you want me to continue this escalation by pulling the asterisk audience directly into the conspiracy asterisk, making them feel as though their own memories are compromised, or tilted toward a global hidden network, revealed, where the others begin to show themselves in ways that can't be ignored? Michael had spent weeks chasing fragments, shadows, messages carved into mirrors and scrawled on Polaroids, but none of it had prepared him for the silence that came before the truth. You know the silence I mean, the kind that doesn't just fall around you, but inside you, the kind that empties you out until you left wondering if you've ever truly been alive, or if you've only been remembering someone else's life on repeat. That silence came to him the night Samuel returned, and with it came a confession. Michael had spent years running from a confession he hadn't even realized he owed. They sat in the hollow of Michael's apartment, the air heavy with the storm pressing against the windows. Samuel didn't bring files this time, no folders or recordings, no proof to dangle like a cruel gift. He just sat across from him, steady, waiting. Michael's throat was raw with words he didn't want to say, but he felt them pushing upward anyway, as if the silence itself was prying them loose. "The night my brother disappeared," Michael whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. "I was there." I let go of his hand. The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. I let go, because something told me to. Not a voice, not a person, just this certainty. Like I already knew what was going to happen. Like it had already happened. He expected Samuel to look away in disgust, to condemn him. But Samuel only leaned forward, his eyes darker than ever, his voice almost tender. "That wasn't your choice," he said. "It was theirs." The way he said theirs froze Michael's chest, because it wasn't a name, wasn't even a description. It was an emptiness, a pronoun that meant everything and nothing at once. And that was when Michael understood this was never about what had happened outside the bar, or inside the red door, or even on that night decades ago when his brother vanished. The mystery wasn't about an event. It was about why it was allowed to happen, about what the act of forgetting, of erasure, revealed about being human. To be human meant living under edits, under omissions, under memories rearranged to keep us docile. To be human was to participate in a story written by something else, and to pretend we had been the authors all along. The room felt thinner as he spoke, like the walls themselves were listening. "If I admit it wasn't me," Michael said, voice trembling, "then I give up the only thing I've had guilt. If it wasn't me, then what am I?" The question was raw, terrifying, because guilt, as poisonous as it had been, was still his anchor. Without it, he was nothing but a vessel. Samuel's eyes flickered, and for the first time Michael wasn't sure if they belonged to him at all. "Then maybe the real choice isn't between guilt and innocence," Samuel murmured. "Maybe the choice is whether you believe any of this was yours to begin with." The words cut deeper than any photograph, any whisper, any recording, because in that moment Michael saw two futures. In one, he believed Samuel, believed that everything he'd ever loved or lost was the result of a design he had no part in. To accept that was to erase himself, To admit he had never existed as more than an experiment, a subject. In the other, he rejected it, clung to the possibility that his decisions, his failures, his sins were his own, that his brother's disappearance was not written by some unseen hand, but by the flawed choices of a boy too weak to hold on. One truth would destroy him, the other would damn him. The storm outside cracked, thunder rattling the glass, and in that sound he remembered something else. His brother's face, not on the night he disappeared, but years earlier crying after a scraped knee, whispering through clenched teeth, "Don't let me go again." The memory wasn't real. Or maybe it was, but it was his, and it broke him open. Michael wept, not the kind of tears that relieve, but the kind that strip you raw. The kind that leave you emptied out and still burning. Samuel didn't move, didn't comfort, didn't interfere. He only watched, and in his stillness, Michael recognized the terrible weight of being human. That even if we are puppets, even if memory is stitched and erased, the pain we carry is real because we carry it. The scars don't care how they were made. When the storm broke, when the air cleared, Michael lifted his eyes. "Tell me," he whispered, "if I accept this, if I accept that I was never in control, what happens?" Samuel smiled then, the faintest curve of his lips, and for the first time, Michael realized the truth might not be hidden in files or footage or whispered names. The truth might simply be the cruelest design of all, that we are allowed to see just enough to know we are trapped, but never enough to escape. Samuel leaned back, his shadow stretching across the wall, and spoke softly, almost lovingly. "Then you wake up." Michael closed his eyes, and for a heartbeat he felt it, the sensation of the dream breaking, the edges of reality peeling back, as if he had lived his entire life inside a story someone else had written. And for the first time he wondered not whether the whispers were real, but whether his own reflection was pellucid. He opened his eyes again, and Samuel was gone. The apartment was empty. Only the Polaroid remained on the table, the one of him sleeping with the blurred figure beside him. Except the figure wasn't blurred anymore. It was clear, it was his brother, awake, staring at him. The screen goes black, a breath of silence. And then, a final line floats against the darkness like a wound that refuses to close. Asterisk, the most terrifying awakening is realizing you were never asleep. Asterisk, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.